The Galactic Council's Grand Chamber was a marvel of engineering, a breathtaking testament to the combined knowledge of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. It was a place of power, where alliances were forged, treaties signed, and entire planets' fates decided. The chamber itself was massive, capable of holding thousands of delegates, each seated according to their species' needs. Floating platforms for those who lacked physical bodies, reinforced slabs for the massive and heavily armored races, and even atmospherically controlled enclosures for beings that thrived in conditions fatal to most others. At the heart of the chamber, suspended in a column of hard light, was a holographic display of Earth slowly rotating in place. The image flickered now and then as data streams poured in, revealing information about the planet's geography, history, and inhabitants. While the display was meant to provide objective facts, the beings gathered around it were anything but neutral. Laughter echoed through the hall, reverberating from different corners of the vast room, some deep and guttural, others high-pitched and chittering. Some species emitted pulses of light or vibrations in place of laughter, but the meaning was the same: mockery. These creatures called themselves humans, rumbled Chancellor Vorkol, the Zelnari Dominion's representative. His scales shimmered in the artificial light, reflecting hues of gold and bronze. Standing at nearly 10 feet tall, his reptilian form exuded dominance. His elongated snout curled in an expression of disdain. They are small. They are weak. They are primitive. A ripple of amusement swept through the assembly. The insectoid Krildar, perched on their multi-jointed limbs, clicked their mandibles in a way that resembled laughter. The massive Yorgath, sentient beings composed of living stone, rumbled with amusement, a sound like boulders grinding together. Even the normally expressionless Velnari, a species of energy-based beings, pulsed with erratic flashes, an indication of amusement among their kind. A representative from the Moggoth Alliance, a gelatinous, multi-eyed entity, waved a slimy appendage in mock concern. "Forgive me, Chancellor, but I fail to see why we are even wasting our time discussing these humans. They are, at best, a newly spacefaring race. Their ships are rudimentary, their weapons laughable. They are barely extended beyond their own solar system. What possible threat could they pose to the established powers of this council?" Another counselor, a being resembling a massive, armored cephalopod, let out a bubbling laugh. "They claim to have warriors." The room erupted into another wave of condescending chuckles. One of the floating, translucent Orvax, a species known for their vast knowledge archives, pulsed its glowing core as it relayed information. According to intercepted transmissions, humans have a specialized class of fighters. They call them Navy SEALs. The amusement intensified. Aquatic predators, sneered a towering warrior from the war-born clans. His forearms crossed over his massive chest. His species, the Vargol, had built their entire civilization upon conquest and battle. To them, war was more than survival. It was culture. Do they intend to fight us with their fish? Mock fear spread among the representatives. Some counselors exaggeratedly cowered in their seats. Others mimicked swimming motions with their appendages, adding to the spectacle of ridicule. Chancellor Vorkol allowed himself a smirk. Let them send one of these so-called warriors. A single human against one of our champions. It will be a valuable lesson for them. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber as a Vorthan representative, a sentient monolith of obsidian, spoke in its slow, booming voice. "And what lesson would that be, Chancellor?" Vorkol's golden eyes gleamed with amusement. "That they do not belong here." The chamber erupted in unanimous agreement. The idea was absurd. A human warrior, an organic, unenhanced, and technologically inferior being, standing against a true champion of the Galactic Council. It was preposterous. Still, for the sake of protocol, the proposition was put forward in an official capacity, though the councillors expected humanity to decline. They had been contacted. After all, they were aware of the terms. Any rational species would recognize the impossibility of the challenge and back down. But then, To the Council's shock, humanity accepted. Not only did they accept, but they sent the name of their chosen champion. His name was Commander Jack Reynolds. The chamber, once filled with boisterous laughter, fell into a stunned silence. The Council had expected a refusal, or perhaps some diplomatic excuse meant to preserve human dignity. Instead, they received confidence. A single warrior, one human, a species barely acknowledged as anything more than a galactic footnote, dared to send just one of their own against a champion of the cosmos. The shock turned to intrigue. A deep, reverberating chuckle emerged from the Warborn clan sector. The massive, four-armed Vargol leaned forward, his red eyes gleaming with amusement. Perhaps we underestimated these creatures. A low hissing laugh came from Vorkol. Perhaps. Or perhaps they are simply as foolish as they are weak. The High Chancellor of the Council, a being composed of shifting metallic plates, finally raised a single appendage, signaling for silence. The murmuring and chuckling faded. "We have issued a challenge," the Chancellor said, his voice resonating through the chamber like the tolling of a great bell. "And humanity has accepted. We shall honor this. A single human warrior will face our chosen champion in combat." The decision was made. Across the chamber, different reactions flickered across the various species. Some still found it amusing. Others were mildly curious. A few, the more warlike races, felt a flicker of respect for the sheer audacity of it. But none truly believed the humans stood a chance. Jack Reynolds was coming, and the Galactic Council had no idea what they had just invited into their world. The combat arena was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the vastly different physiologies of the Galactic Council's warriors. The floor, reinforced with adaptive plating, could withstand the force of creatures as small as an insectoid Krildar or as massive as a warborn juggernaut. The walls shimmered with containment fields, programmed to shift in response to any combatant's unique abilities, whether it be corrosive acid, psionic waves, or brute physical force. This was where the greatest warriors in the galaxy proved their dominance. And today, it would be where humanity was humiliated. The arena was packed with spectators from across the cosmos, a sea of shifting colors, glowing appendages, and armored figures all gathered to witness the event. The Galactic Council had made this spectacle public, broadcasting it to hundreds of worlds. Billions of beings tuned in, eager to watch the tiny, unremarkable human be crushed. Chancellor Vorkol, seated in a throne-like structure on the upper balcony, surveyed the arena with a satisfied expression. "Let us see if these humans possess even a fraction of the courage they so foolishly claim," he muttered. A booming voice echoed across the arena, presenting the challenger from the newly recognized Terran Confederation, Commander Jack Reynolds. A single figure stepped onto the arena floor. Jack Reynolds moved with measured confidence, his posture relaxed, yet alert. At 6 feet tall, he was dwarfed by many of the warriors in attendance. He wore a simple, form-fitting combat suit, void of the elaborate armor or cybernetic enhancements common among the other species. No power shielding, no exoskeleton, just a man and his instincts. The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers. "This is their best," scoffed a Krildar warrior, its multifaceted eyes glinting with disdain. "They don't even enhance their soldiers." A warborn general snorted. Jack ignored the voices. He had been in worse situations before. The stares of thousands of beings, the overwhelming odds, none of it mattered. His focus was on the massive figure emerging from the opposite gate. The announcer's voice boomed again. Facing him, the undefeated champion of the Wargothian Dominion, Korgoth the Devourer. A hush fell over the arena. Korgoth was a living nightmare. Towering at 12 feet tall, his body was a mass of corded muscle wrapped in thick, armored hide. 4 massive arms flexed, each ending in clawed hands capable of rending metal. His face was a brutal snarl of tusks and glowing red eyes. The Wargothian species was infamous for their ferocity, each one born into battle, raised to conquer, and conditioned to withstand pain beyond comprehension. Korgoth was their greatest warrior, a living war machine who had never known defeat. The odds were so skewed that many counselors had stopped betting entirely. The match was no longer about if Jack would lose, but rather how long he would survive. Korgoth grinned, baring jagged teeth. His deep, rumbling voice filled the arena. "Your people are weak. Your world is soft. I will break you, little human." Jack met his gaze, expression unreadable. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his knuckles, and replied in a voice steady as steel. "You can try." A beat of silence. The signal blared. The fight had begun. Korgoth moved first, a blur of massive muscle and speed that defied his size. He closed the distance in a second, one of his arms swinging in a bone-crushing arc. The sheer force of the attack could have torn through starship hulls. Jack ducked, the massive limb whistling past his head. He moved with fluid precision, stepping to the side and striking in one seamless motion, 2 rapid blows to a nerve cluster in Korgoth's ribs. The champion barely reacted. A second strike came, a downward hammer fist meant to flatten Jack into the ground. He rolled, narrowly avoiding it, but Korgoth was fast. The beast anticipated Jack's movement, lashing out with a backhand swipe. It connected. Jack was sent flying, his body slamming into the far wall. The crowd erupted in cheers. Korgoth laughed, his voice a deep, guttural rumble. "This is your warrior. This is humanity's best." Jack exhaled sharply, shaking off the impact. His ribs ached, but pain was an old friend. He pushed himself up, rolling his shoulders. "Not bad," he muttered. Korgoth's grin faltered. Jack wasn't broken. He wasn't even afraid. Jack's mind assessed a fight like a tactical puzzle. His strong, but predictable, overconfident, favors brute strength. Weak points, joints, throat, eyes. Adjust, adapt, overcome. Korgoth charged again, but this time, Jack was ready. He sidestepped, pivoting sharply. Instead of dodging completely, he redirected Korgoth's momentum, grabbing the beast's wrist and using his own force against him. Korgoth stumbled, off balance for the first time. Jack struck, a lightning-fast elbow to the throat, a precise stomp to the knee joint, a calculated knife-hand strike to the nerve cluster under the champion's armpit. Korgoth roared in pain and fury. The crowd's laughter had faded. The massive warrior swung wildly, enraged, but Jack was faster. He dodged with precision honed from years of experience, striking back with ruthless efficiency. Every move was deliberate. Every strike was designed to cripple. A dislocated elbow, a crushed kneecap, a devastating blow to the throat. Korgoth staggered. Blood, thick and dark, dripped from his mouth. His breathing was ragged. His once mighty stance wavered. Jack didn't let up. He pressed forward, relentless. His strikes were surgical, breaking down the champion piece by piece. And then, with one final blow, a brutal hammer fist to the temple, Korgoth collapsed. Silence. The entire arena was deathly quiet. The undefeated champion of the Wargothians lay on the ground, unmoving. Jack stood over him, breathing steady, his expression unreadable. He wiped the alien blood from his knuckles. Then, finally, he spoke. "Still think we're weak." The Galactic Council had no response. Silence hung over the arena like a suffocating blanket. The gathered representatives of the Galactic Council, once filled with mockery and scorn, now sat frozen in disbelief. The spectacle that was supposed to be humanity's humiliation had instead become an event of unprecedented shock. Korgoth the Devourer, the undefeated champion of the Wargothians, lay motionless on the arena floor. His massive form twitched slightly, his breathing ragged, but he did not rise. The towering warrior, who had felled titans, crushed armored foes, and battled creatures that could tear through starships, had been defeated. By a human. By one human. Jack Reynolds stood over his fallen opponent, shaking his hands to loosen the tension in his knuckles. His breathing was steady, his stance firm. There was no boasting, no grand celebration, just a warrior surveying his work. He had fought in worse conditions. He had taken down enemies that outnumbered and outgunned him before. To him, this was another mission completed. To the galaxy, it was an earth-shattering moment. The crowd, made up of warriors, politicians, and dignitaries from dozens of species, remained silent. Then, slowly, murmurs began to ripple through the masses. Shock gave way to confusion. Confusion gave way to realization. And then came something Jack had not expected. Applause. It started as a single, thunderous stomp from the Warborn clan's section of the stands. Then another, and another. The massive, four-armed warriors, who had mocked humanity mere hours ago, now acknowledged Jack Reynolds with a warrior's salute, pounding their chests, growling in approval. Other warriors followed. The Vorthans, the living stone beings, rumbled in what sounded like approval. Even the insectoid Krildar, who saw all non-hive creatures as inferior, clicked their mandibles in what could only be described as reluctant respect. Only the high-ranking council members remained silent. Chancellor Vorkol, his once smug expression now replaced with unreadable stillness, rose from his seat. He was a veteran of countless political games, and he understood immediately what had just happened. The council had miscalculated. Humanity was no longer a joke. Jack looked up toward the council's high balcony, meeting Vorkol's gaze. The two locked eyes for a long moment, and then Jack did something that sent another ripple through the crowd. He smirked. It wasn't an arrogant smirk. It wasn't the expression of someone gloating over his victory. It was the smirk of a soldier who had just proven everything his enemy had believed was wrong. Vorkol's claws tightened on the railing. A voice broke through the silence, amplified by the arena's speakers. It belonged to the High Chancellor, the ancient metallic being who presided over the council's affairs. His glowing eyes regarded the scene before him, his voice steady and unreadable. Commander Jack Reynolds, you have won. Jack nodded, but said nothing. By the laws of this council, the High Chancellor continued, humanity has proven itself in combat, and yet one battle does not decide the fate of a species. What do you seek? Jack's eyes swept the gathered dignitaries. He had expected a question like this. His superiors had made it clear, this was not just about the fight. It was about securing humanity's place among the stars. He took a step forward and spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the arena. Recognition. Murmurs spread among the council. We are not a galactic power, Jack continued, his tone calm but unwavering. We are not an empire. We don't have fleets that can match yours, and we don't have centuries of interstellar warfare under our belts. But what we do have is a will to fight, the will to survive, the will to win. His eyes locked onto Vorkol again. You laughed at us, he said, voice steady. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. And if you make the mistake of underestimating humanity again, you'll regret it. A tense silence followed. Then, to Jack's surprise, a deep chuckle echoed through the arena. The war-born general, a massive brute with 4 arms and a scarred face, stood up from his section. I like this human, he growled, flashing sharp teeth. He fights with honor. He speaks with strength. He turned to the council and slammed a fist against his chest. The war-born recognized the strength of humanity. Let them stand as warriors among us. A ripple of agreement moved through the warrior races. The Vorthans rumbled in approval. The Krildar representative, though hesitant, clicked his mandibles in reluctant agreement. Even the energy-based Vilnari emitted a series of pulses in recognition. But Vorkol's camp remained silent. The Zelnari Dominion, the Moggoth Alliance, and other politically dominant species were not as quick to accept humanity's sudden rise. The High Chancellor considered for a long moment before finally speaking. The Council will deliberate. Humanity's status among the stars will be decided in the coming days. It was not a promise, but it was not a dismissal, either. Jack nodded once. Then I'll be waiting. With that, he turned and walked off the battlefield, leaving the Galactic Council to grapple with a reality they never saw coming. Behind closed doors, Hours later, in the private chambers of the Zelnari Dominion, Vorkol stood before a holographic projection of his inner circle. "This is unacceptable," one of his advisors hissed, a serpentine alien with piercing yellow eyes. "That human should have been crushed." "And yet, he was not," Vorkol said, his tone measured. He had spent decades in the political arena, and he knew when tides were shifting. The Warborn had accepted humanity. Other factions were considering it, and the High Chancellor was listening. The Zelnari had always operated from a position of superiority. But now, humanity had become an unpredictable factor. "What do we do?" another advisor asked. Vorkol exhaled slowly. He had seen what Jack Reynolds was capable of, and more importantly, he had seen something else in the human's eyes, something he recognized from countless war campaigns. A refusal to kneel. Vorkol's claws tapped against the table. "We prepare," he said finally. "Humanity is not a power yet, but if left unchecked, they could become one." His golden eyes gleamed. "And that," he murmured, "we cannot allow." The aftermath of the fight spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Footage of Jack Reynolds dismantling Korgut the Devourer circulated through the Hola networks, playing on every major world, space station, and battlecruiser. In some corners of the galaxy, it was met with disbelief. In others, with grudging respect. But in the highest echelons of power, it was met with fear. The Galactic Council convened behind closed doors, their discussions tense. Humanity had proven its strength, but the question remained, what would they do with it? A seat at the table. Jack Reynolds stood in the heart of the Galactic Council chambers, a vast and towering structure orbiting a dying star. In front of him were some of the most powerful beings in existence, species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. He could feel their eyes on him, their scrutiny like a blade at his throat. Seated at the head of the chamber was the High Chancellor, an ancient construct of energy and wisdom, its glowing form shifting slightly. Beside him, Vorkol sat rigid, his golden eyes studying Jack with an unreadable expression. "The Council has deliberated." The High Chancellor finally spoke, his voice like 1,000 whispers layered upon one another. "Humanity has demonstrated resilience, strength, and an unyielding spirit. The warrior races have accepted you, but strength alone does not grant you power." Jack remained silent, letting the Chancellor continue. "You seek recognition," the Chancellor said. "Very well. The Terran Confederation will be granted provisional membership within the Galactic Council." Murmurs erupted across the chamber. Some were supportive, others were seething with displeasure. Jack kept his expression neutral, but inside, he knew this was big. Humanity had gone from a species barely acknowledged to a recognized member of the galaxy's ruling body. It was a historic moment. But Vorkol wasn't finished. "We have seen your strength," the Zelnari Chancellor said, his tone measured but laced with something cold. "But strength alone is not enough. Membership comes with responsibility. Power must be tempered by wisdom." Jack narrowed his eyes slightly. He could feel something coming. "Which is why," Vorkol continued, "humanity must prove itself one more time." A hush fell over the chamber. Jack tilted his head. "I thought I already did." A flicker of amusement passed through some of the Warborn representatives, but Vorkol remained unfazed. "A single victory in an arena does not make a civilization strong," he said smoothly. "We propose a final test. A mission that will determine whether humanity is truly worthy of standing among us." Jack crossed his arms. "And what mission is that?" The High Chancellor's gaze dimmed slightly. "A war. A test of fire." Jack stood on the bridge of the TCS Vela, humanity's most advanced warship, staring at the holographic map before him. The Council's so-called test wasn't just a challenge. It was a setup. A rogue warlord named Gorvash had been terrorizing the outer colonies of the Galactic Council, launching raids on trading routes, enslaving weaker species, and destabilizing the region. For years, the Council had debated how to deal with him, unwilling to commit their own forces to what they considered an inconvenience. Now, they had their solution: humanity. If we succeed, we earn our place, Admiral Harris said, arms crossed beside Jack. If we fail, we prove them right. That we're not ready, Jack exhaled. Then we don't fail. The fleet had been assembled. 5 Terran battle cruisers, 24 smaller escort ships, and a strike force of elite soldiers. It was the largest human military operation ever conducted in deep space. And at the center of it all was Jack. The mission was clear: take down Gorvash, secure the sector, prove humanity belonged. But there was a problem. Vorkol didn't want them to succeed. The ambush. The fleet dropped out of warp near the Warlord's stronghold, a massive asteroid fortress bristling with defenses. Gorvash's fleet was already waiting for them, but Jack wasn't concerned. He had fought against worse odds before. Launch all fighters, Jack commanded. Begin the assault. The battle erupted in a storm of laser fire and explosions. The Vela led the charge, its railguns tearing through enemy ships. Strike teams boarded the fortress, fighting room by room to take control. Jack was among them, leading his squad with ruthless efficiency. Everything was going according to plan, until the betrayal. Without warning, 3 Allied warships turned on the Terran fleet, opening fire. Chaos erupted as the once coordinated attack turned into a desperate scramble. "They set us up!" Admiral Harris roared. Jack gritted his teeth as he gunned down an enemy soldier. He had suspected something like this might happen, but seeing it unfold was different. Vorkol and his allies hadn't sent them here to prove themselves. They had sent them here to die, turning the tide. But if the Council had underestimated humanity before, they were about to learn their mistake once again. Jack didn't panic. He didn't hesitate. He adapted. "Ret-ask the gunships to hit the traitors," he ordered. "Redirect firepower to cover our boarding teams. We're not going down without a fight." On the battlefield, there was no politics, only survival. And humans were survivors. The battle turned bloody. Ships were torn apart. Soldiers fought in brutal close-quarters combat. But inch by inch, the Terrans pushed forward. Jack reached the command center of Gorvash's fortress, blasting through the last of the Warlord's guards. Gorvash himself, a hulking brute with cybernetic enhancements, roared as he lunged at Jack. But Jack had fought monsters before. The fight was brutal. Gorvash was stronger, faster, but Jack was smarter. He dodged, weaved, and struck with precision. A broken knee, a shattered jaw, a final gunshot between the eyes. Gorvash fell. The Warlord was dead. The fortress was taken. The fleet, despite the betrayal, still stood. Humanity had won. The consequences. When Jack returned to the council chambers, he didn't wait for formalities. He strode into the center of the room and threw Gorvash's insignia onto the floor. "You sent us to die," he said coldly, eyes locked onto Vorkol. "And yet, here we are." The chamber was silent. The High Chancellor's glowing eyes regarded Jack for a long moment before finally speaking. "Humanity has passed the test." Some members of the council looked displeased. Others nodded in approval. The war-born general gave Jack a knowing grin. Vorkol remained motionless. He had lost. Jack exhaled. It wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. Humanity was no longer a joke. No longer an afterthought. They were here, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again.